Today we are looking at deductions from gross pay. Deductions are subtracted from gross pay, which is also your total pay. Withholding taxes is money deducted from an employee's wages. The amount depends on the worker's wages, their marital status, and number of withholding allowances claimed. So this is also you will also be seen as called income tax. Withholding allowances is used to reduce the number of tax taken out. Workers may claim one withholding allowance for themselves, one for a spouse, and one for each child or dependent. We are going to be using a table to help us find the withheld amount from the worker's wages. So here's a couple steps to use the resource handout. So first thing, you're going to use the table prepared by the government. The table we are using is from 2018. We are going to determine whether the person is single or married, and depending if they're single or married, that's going to tell us which table to use. The first table is dealing with a single person, and then the second table is dealing with a married. After we determine that, we are going to read down the if wages are column until you reach the correct wage line. So if you look at this table below, we're going to look on the far part to the left, and then our amount for the weekly has to be in between these two numbers, and it has to be at least the first number but less than the second number. After you find which column you need, you're going to go across the row, and you are going to determine the number of withholding allowances that employee claims. So if you see here, we go from 0 all the way to 10. So depending on how many dependents they have, that's going to tell you how much money is going to be deducted from their paycheck each week. So let's look at the first example. A single receptionist's weekly wages are $380 for one withholding allowance. What federal income tax is withheld? So I snipped out part of the table so it's easier to refer to. So we need to look at the single person. And then our weekly wages are $380. So let's look and find where $380 is. And 380 we see in both of these two rows, but it has to be less than. So we're going to use the second one here. So from the interval of 380 to 390. So then we're going to look how many withholding allowances they have, which is 1. So go over to 1. So the amount that is taken out of the paycheck would be $24. Okay, let's look at the next example. Amy is married and earns $514 each week. She claims 2 withholding allowances. What amount to be deducted from her weekly earnings for federal withholding taxes? So now we have to look at the second table. It's dealing with a married person. So we do the same process. We find the weekly amount that she's paid over here on the left and find that interval. So 514. Let's find where 514 is. It is going to be between 505 and 515. So we're going to go across this row, and she has 2 that she's withholding from. So first would be 0, 1, 2. So she is taking out $13 for her withholding taxes. Okay, now we're going to look into Social Security and Medicare tax deductions. So the tax for Social Security is part of a Federal Insurance Contribution Act, which is also called FICA. The FICA benefits are included below. The first one is disability benefits. This is for workers who are disabled and unable to work. Then it covers Medicare, which provides hospital insurance for some disabled people and for those that are over 65. Then it covers retirement benefits, which are for people who are at least 62. And lastly, survivors benefits. And these are paid to spouses and dependent children when a Social Security recipient dies. So let's look at the actual tax rates. So the overall tax rate is 7.65%. And that tax rate is broken down into Social Security and Medicare. So Social Security tax is 6.2%, and Medicare tax is 1.45%. So if you were to add Social Security and Medicare taxes together, you get the overall tax of 7.65%. So we need to find the total FICA tax on $89,000. So the overall tax rate is 7.65%. When we are dealing with percents, we have to change it over to a decimal. So we are going to move it 2 places to the left. So we're going to put 0.0765. So we move it 2, and then we're going to multiply it by the amount, $89,000. And when we multiply this, we get $6,808.50. So that's the total FICA tax that will be taken out. Okay, let's look at this other problem. FICA taxes owed by workers are collected by their employers. Employers deduct the tax from each employee's earnings. Employers must also pay a FICA tax equal to the FICA taxes they deduct from their employees' earnings. So your employer and you both pay the FICA tax. So let's look at this example. Sarah earns $562 during the last week of January. Her total FICA taxes her company deducts from her wages. So we need to find this amount. So it's the same percentage, 7.65%. We have to change that to a decimal. So 0.0765 times the amount of $562. And when we multiply this, we get the tax of $42.99. Okay, let's look at the next one. We're going to find the total FICA tax amount on $1,087.30. Again, same process. We're going to use the decimal form of the percent, so 0.0765, and multiply it by the amount, $1,087.30. When we multiply this, we get $83.18. Okay. Now we're going to look at the total deductions and net pay. So net pay is the remaining amount after all deductions deductions are subtracted from the gross pay. The gross pay was the amount we were finding in our last unit. So now we're subtracting out all the deductions from that amount. So net pay as an equation is equal to gross pay minus deductions. And there are multiple deductions coming out. So here you can see a snippet of an employee's earnings and payroll. So the week ending on 2/4, the regular pay was $375. There was no overtime pay. So total earnings, so the gross pay, is $375. Now we have all of these deductions taken out, so subtracted out. So we have a federal withholding tax, Social Security, Medicare, life insurance, health insurance, any other taxes are going to take out. And then the total amount of all the deductions. So we're adding all of these deductions together. And then we subtract the gross pay, so this total, by the total of the deductions to get our net pay. So let's do a couple examples. Mary earned gross pay of $426 last week. Federal withholding tax of $48, Social Security tax of 6.2%, Medicare tax of 1.45%, health insurance premiums of $45.80, and union dues of $12.56. They were all deducted from our gross pay. We have to find Mary's net pay. So they gave us our withholding tax, so we do not have to use a chart to find it. But we have percentages here, so we have to find the dollar amount. So Social Security tax was a 6.2%. So do 6.2% of our amount. So change that 6.2 to a decimal, so 0.062 times our amount. So we have a Social Security tax of $26.41. Now we have to find the Medicare tax. Same process, but our percent now is 1.45%. Change it to a decimal, 0.0145 times our amount, 426. When we multiply this through, we get $6.18. Now we need to find the total amount of deductions. So we're going to take our withholding tax of $48, our Social Security tax, which is now $26.41, our Medicare tax of $6.18, our insurance is $45.80, and the union dues, $12.56. When we add that all together, we get a total of $138.95. This is what's being deducted, which is being subtracted. So we take our gross pay amount, $426, and subtract out our deductions, which is $138.95. And when we subtract that out, we get our total for net pay of $287.05. So this amount here is what's being pocketed into your pocket. So that's your true pay that's going into your bank. Okay, let's look at the last example here. Jay earned gross pay of $410 last week. From his gross pay, the following were subtracted: federal withholding tax of $46, Social Security tax 6.2%, Medicare tax of 1.45%, health insurance of $34.88 and $40 for his savings plan. We need to find Jay's net pay. So we first need to find our Social Security and Medicare tax since they gave us the percentage. So Social Security has a tax of 6.2%. Change that to a decimal, 0.062, times our amount of gross pay, so $410. When we multiply that through, we get $25.42. Now, Medicare tax. Same thing, but 1.45%. Change to decimals, 0.0145. Times our gross pay, and we get $11.89. Now we need to find all of our deductions. Add them all together. So our federal withholding tax, $46. Social Security, $25.42. Medicare tax, health insurance, and lastly, the savings plan. So of $152.25. So now if we take the gross pay of $410 and subtract our deductions of $152.25, we get a total of $257.75. So this amount is our net pay, and it's how much we are pocketing. So that is everything for our lesson. So please reach out if you have any questions dealing with deductions from our gross pay.